Ladies and gentlemen, every one of us has felt fear, that trembling in your chest, that voice whispering, what if I fail? Fear is universal. It's what makes us human. But here's the truth. Fear was never meant to stop us. Fascinated, it was meant to guide us. The difference between those who succeed and those who stand still is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to turn that fear into fuel. I'm fascinated. Fear is one of the most powerful emotions we experience as human beings. It can freeze us in our tracks, cloud our judgment, and make us doubt our abilities. But fear itself is not the real problem. I'm fascinated. It's how we interpret and respond to it that determines our progress. Many people view fear as a signal to stop, a barrier meant to protect them from danger or embarrassment. Yet in reality, fear is energy, pure, fascinating energy that can either destroy or drive us, depending on how we use it. When understood properly, fear is not the enemy. It's a misunderstood form of power that can be transformed into motivation, creativity, and resilience. I'm fascinated. Every emotion has a purpose. Happiness keeps us connected. Anger reminds us of our values, and fear alerts us to potential threats. However, in the modern world, fascinated, most of our fears are no longer about survival. They're about uncertainty. We fear failure, rejection, loss, or judgment. These fears don't threaten our lives, but our comfort zones, our sense of identity, and our perceived security. Fascinated. This is where we often misread fear. Instead of recognizing it as an emotional signal asking us to pay attention, we treat it as a command to retreat. The energy that could propel us forward is instead wasted on avoidance and worry. Fascinated. When you feel fear, your body activates a surge of adrenaline, heightens focus, and prepares you to act. Fascinated. That same biological response that helped our ancestors escape danger can also help us take bold steps in life if we direct it properly. For example, before giving an important presentation, fascinated, you may feel your heart racing and palms sweating. That's fear as energy in motion. If you label that sensation as anxiety, you might freeze or underperform. But if you interpret it as excitement and readiness, your mind shifts. Fascinated, you begin to see fear not as a barrier, but as a resource, fuel for performance. The physiological reaction is the same. The difference lies in your perspective. Simon Sinek often speaks about reframing fear through purpose. Fascinated. When you know why you're doing something, fear becomes less intimidating because the focus shifts from the self to the mission. Imagine a firefighter running into a burning building. The fear is real, but the purpose is stronger. I'm fascinated. That energy is channeled into action. The same applies in everyday life. When we connect our actions to something meaningful, fear's power transforms from paralysis to propulsion. Fascinated, it becomes the emotional spark that reminds us what truly matters. Understanding fear also means acknowledging that it will never disappear. Waiting to act until you feel ready or until fear vanishes is a recipe for stagnation. Fascinated, the key is to develop a relationship with fear, to respect it without obeying it. By recognizing fear as energy, you can decide how to use it. You can let it drain you through overthinking, or you can harness it to fuel preparation, fascinated effort, and passion. Athletes, performers, and entrepreneurs do this instinctively. They don't eliminate fear. They train themselves to convert it into focus and intensity. Fascinated. One effective way to turn fear into energy is through awareness. When fear arises, instead of suppressing it, pause and ask, what is this fear trying to tell me? Maybe it's signaling that you care deeply about the outcome. Fascinated. Maybe it's pointing out that you need more preparation. Either way, acknowledging it gives you control. Once you name the fear, it loses its mysterious power. The unknown becomes known. Fascinated. And the energy that once fueled anxiety can now drive constructive action. Fear can also act as a mirror, reflecting where growth is needed. The things we fear most often indicate the areas where we have the most potential to evolve. Fascinated. Fear of speaking may hide a gift for communication waiting to emerge. Fear of failure may point to ambitions too important to ignore. When we lean into those fears with curiosity instead of resistance, I'm fascinated, we discover new layers of strength and purpose. Ultimately, fear is a signal that we are alive, aware, and on the edge of something significant. It's the universe's way of saying, fascinated, you're about to grow. By reframing it as energy rather than opposition, we unlock one of life's greatest secrets. Fear doesn't have to hold us back. It can push us forward. It's not an obstacle on the path to success. Fascinated is the very force that fuels it. Purpose has the extraordinary power to change how we experience fear. When a person lives without purpose, fear often feels like a heavy burden, something that paralyzes thought and restricts action. Fascinating, when there's a strong why, fear begins to take on a new shape. It no longer feels like a stop sign, it becomes a driving force. Purpose gives direction to our emotions, especially fear, and transforms it into passion, energy, fascinated, and focus. When we understand the deeper reason behind what we do, fear no longer controls us, it fuels us. It stops being about survival and starts being about significance. Fascinated, Sinek's idea of start with why teaches that knowing your purpose, your reason for being or doing, is what inspires sustained motivation. Without purpose, fascinated, fear of failure or criticism becomes overwhelming because there's no deeper meaning to hold on to. But when we are guided by something bigger than ourselves, fear loses its authority. It still appears fascinated, but it no longer dictates the path. A teacher driven by the purpose of shaping young minds doesn't quit because of fear of failure. A leader guided by the purpose of serving others doesn't crumble under the weight of uncertainty. I'm fascinated. Their sense of meaning becomes the anchor that steadies them in the storm of fear. Purpose creates emotional alignment. It shifts focus from what might happen to me to what I'm here to accomplish. When people focus only on themselves, fascinated, fear amplifies every possible risk, embarrassment, rejection, failure. But when attention moves to a cause, a mission, or a belief, the fear shrinks in comparison to what is at stake. For example, fascinated, a nurse working through exhaustion in an emergency room doesn't stop because of fear of mistakes. Their purpose of saving lives gives them courage to continue. Purpose brings clarity, and with clarity comes strength. Fascinated, it turns fear from an obstacle into a signal reminding us that what we are doing matters deeply. Purpose also brings emotional resilience. When the journey gets difficult and fear starts to rise, fascinated, purpose reminds us why we started in the first place. It acts as a constant source of motivation, allowing us to push forward even when outcomes are uncertain. A person without purpose interprets fear as a reason to quit. I'm fascinated. A person with purpose interprets fear as evidence that they are pursuing something meaningful. It's this difference that separates those who simply exist from those who truly live. I'm fascinated. The presence of fear becomes proof that the dream is big enough to matter. Fear often intensifies when we are on the edge of transformation, but purpose gives us the courage to step through it. When we act from purpose, fascinated, fear transforms from an internal enemy into a tool for focus. It sharpens our attention, fuels preparation, and builds emotional depth. It's why artists, inventors, and entrepreneurs often channel their fear into creativity. Fascinated, they're not immune to fear, they've simply learned to let their vision be louder. Their passion redirects the energy of fear into productive effort. Fascinated, fear becomes a reminder that they're doing something that pushes boundaries and matters to others. Another powerful effect of purpose is that it shifts how we define success and failure. When fear drives us, I'm fascinated, success is defined by avoidance of loss or pain. When purpose drives us, success is defined by progress and contribution. Even failure takes on new meaning. It becomes feedback, not finality. Fascinated, every setback becomes a lesson that refines the mission rather than ruins it. Purpose transforms fear of failing into curiosity about learning. It's no longer about whether you win or lose, fascinated, but about staying committed to something that gives your work and life meaning. The moment we connect deeply with our purpose, we gain emotional freedom. Fear might still whisper doubts. Fascinated, but its voice grows faint compared to the clarity of why we do what we do. Purpose gives fear direction. It channels that raw emotion into momentum. It becomes the fuel that ignites creativity, builds endurance, and sustains courage. Fascinated. When you act from purpose, fear becomes part of your rhythm, not a reason to stop. It becomes an ally that pushes you to prepare, to stay humble, and to strive for excellence. In the end, purpose doesn't erase fear. It redeems it. Fascinated, transforming it into the passion that drives us to do extraordinary things. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear, but true courage is the art of acting despite fear. Fascinated, every person who has ever achieved something meaningful has felt the grip of fear, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough. What separates the courageous from the timid is not a lack of fear, fascinated, but a willingness to move forward in its presence. Courage means acknowledging fear, feeling it fully, yet choosing to act because the purpose, dream, or goal is too important to abandon. I'm fascinated. It is the conscious decision to rise above instinct and step into uncertainty with faith and determination. From a young age, people are taught that being brave means not being afraid, but this creates an impossible standard. I'm fascinated. Everyone feels fear because it's a natural human response to the unknown. The body's instinct to protect us kicks in whenever we face something unfamiliar or risky. Courage, therefore, I'm fascinated, isn't about erasing the instinct, it's about managing it. It's choosing to move forward when every part of you wants to step back. When you understand this, I'm fascinated, you stop waiting to feel ready or be fearless before taking action, because that day will never come. You start realizing that fear and courage are partners, not opposites. Simon Sinek often says that leadership is not about being in charge, but about taking care of those in your charge. That requires courage to make hard decisions, to stand up for values, to admit mistakes, and to be vulnerable. Fascinated, true courage in leadership isn't loud or aggressive. It's calm, compassionate, and consistent in the face of fear. It's the willingness to say, I don't know the outcome, fascinated, but I believe this is the right thing to do. This kind of courage inspires others because people are drawn not to perfection, but to authenticity. When leaders admit fear, but act anyway, fascinated, they give everyone else permission to do the same. Courage also requires perspective. When fear dominates the mind, magnifies risks, and minimizes capability, it convinces you that failure will be unbearable, when in reality, fascinated, failure is often the beginning of growth. Courage is built by confronting this distortion, by taking small steps that prove fear wrong. Every time you act despite fear, fascinated, you rewire your mind to associate uncertainty with possibility rather than danger. Over time, what once terrified you becomes familiar. The act of facing fear repeatedly is what strengthens confidence, resilience, and self-trust. Fascinated, it's important to remember that courage doesn't always look grand or heroic. Sometimes it's quiet and unseen. It's the student raising their hand to speak in class despite anxiety, the entrepreneur starting again after a failure, fascinated, or the person admitting they need help. These small acts of bravery accumulate into profound personal growth. Courage in daily life is built through these small, consistent choices to speak honestly, to take initiative. I'm fascinated, to stand up for what matters. Over time, they form the foundation of a strong and fearless spirit. Fear thrives in silence, but courage grows through action. The moment you take a single step forward, fear begins to lose its grip. Fascinated, the action itself becomes a source of empowerment. The body learns, the mind adapts, and what once seemed impossible starts to feel achievable. The process of doing, no matter how uncertain, creates momentum that fear cannot stop. Fascinated action is the antidote to fear, and courage is the bridge between fear and freedom. What makes courage so transformative is that it builds character. When you act in the face of fear, you don't just achieve a goal, you evolve. Fascinated, you learn that fear is not a wall, but a mirror reflecting what you care about most. The things that scare you often point directly to your greatest potential. By acting anyway, you reclaim your power. Fascinated, you prove to yourself that you are not defined by fear, but by your choices. In the end, courage is not about erasing fear, but embracing it as part of the journey. Fear will always be there when something meaningful is at stake. Fascinated, but that's how you know you're alive and growing. To act despite fear is to declare that your purpose is stronger than your hesitation, your vision greater than your doubt. Fascinated. That is the essence of true courage. It's not the absence of fear, but the triumph of the heart over it. Fear is often seen as a signal to stop, a flashing warning light telling us that danger lies ahead. Yet, in truth, fascinated, fear is not always a sign of threat. Sometimes it's a sign of opportunity. It appears at the edge of growth just before we take a step into something new. Fascinated. The discomfort we feel when facing fear is not meant to hold us back, but to alert us that we are moving beyond what is familiar. Fear, in its purest form, is a sign that we are about to change, evolve. I'm fascinated and discover new parts of ourselves. When we learn to interpret fear this way, it becomes a powerful compass, pointing us toward personal and professional development. Human beings are wired to seek comfort and predictability. Fascinated, the mind associates safety with the familiar, and anything unknown triggers anxiety. But progress and comfort cannot coexist. Every time we take a risk, start a new project, or face a challenge, we step into uncertainty. Fascinated, fear naturally arises because we are entering unfamiliar territory. The people who grow the most are not those who never feel fear, but those who recognize it as a natural part of progress. And I'm fascinated. They understand that fear is not necessarily a red light to stop, but sometimes a green light to go, a sign that they are on the verge of transformation. Simon Sinek's teachings about purpose and leadership aligned with this idea. Fascinated. He reminds us that growth often requires stepping into discomfort because comfort breeds stagnation. Leaders who innovate, create, and inspire are those willing to embrace uncertainty and risk. Fascinated. They do not see fear as a barrier, but as evidence that they are exploring new ground. Fascinated. Every major achievement in human history, from scientific breakthroughs to social change, began with people who faced fear and chose to move forward anyway. They felt doubt, hesitation, and risk. Fascinated, but they recognized that fear often accompanies significance. The bigger the challenge, the stronger the fear, and therefore the greater the potential for growth. Fear points toward growth because it pushes us to question our limits. Fascinated, it invites us to test what we are capable of, to develop new skills, and to adapt to new situations. For example, an entrepreneur launching a new business faces fear of failure, but that very fear forces them to prepare, strategize, fascinated, and innovate more effectively. A student facing fear before a big exam studies harder and learns deeper lessons about resilience and discipline. Fear sharpens our awareness and strengthens our capacity to perform under pressure. Fascinated, without fear, there would be no challenge, and without challenge, there would be no growth. The discomfort fear brings is not something to escape, but to embrace. Every time we confront fear and move forward, our comfort zone expands. Fascinated, what once seemed intimidating becomes manageable, and we gain confidence. Growth is not a single leap. It's a continuous process of stepping into fear and discovering that we are stronger than we thought. With each step, fear loses its power and courage takes its place. This process builds not just skill, but character, the deep inner strength that allows us to face future fears with greater wisdom and calm. However, fascinated, recognizing fear as a sign of growth requires self-awareness. It's important to distinguish between the fear that protects and the fear that limits. The fear of physical harm keeps us safe, fascinated, but the fear of judgment or failure often restricts our potential. When we learn to differentiate between the two, we gain freedom. Fascinated, we begin to see that emotional fear, the kind that arises when we chase dreams or take risks, is often the gateway to growth. It's the mind's way of saying, fascinated, you're about to step into something that matters. Over time, we begin to appreciate fear for what it truly is, a teacher. It teaches humility when we take on challenges, patience when we stumble, I'm fascinated, and resilience when we rise again. It shows us where we still have room to evolve. The people who thrive are not those who eliminate fear, but those who use it as feedback. They listen to fear, learn from it. I'm fascinated, and move through it with purpose. They understand that behind every fear lies a lesson, a skill, or a strength waiting to be uncovered. When you start to see fear as a signal of growth instead of danger, everything changes. I'm fascinated. Fear no longer means stop. It means pay attention. Something important is happening. It becomes a friend rather than a foe, a motivator instead of a barrier. Each time you push through it, fascinated, you expand what is possible for yourself. And in that expansion, you find progress, purpose, and the courage to keep evolving into your fullest potential. Failure is one of the most powerful teachers in life. Fascinating, yet it is also one of the most feared experiences. Many people spend their lives trying to avoid failure, not realizing that in doing so, they also avoid growth. The truth is that every successful person has failed, often, repeatedly. Fascinated, what separates them from those who stop trying is their relationship with failure. They see it not as a sign of weakness or defeat, but as a source of wisdom and strength. Failure contains within it the energy of fear. Fascinated, but when that fear is understood, it becomes the very fuel that drives success. The fear of failing can paralyze us, or it can motivate us to prepare harder, learn faster, and push further than we ever thought possible. Fascinated, fear of failure often originates from a desire for control and perfection. We want to know that every step we take will lead to success, that every effort will be rewarded. But life doesn't work that way. Fascinated, the journey of achievement is filled with trial and error, uncertainty and setbacks. Those who fear failure too much end up avoiding challenges altogether. They choose safety over growth, comfort over courage. Fascinated. But those who accept failure as part of progress develop a powerful mindset. They understand that falling short does not mean the end of the road. It means they are on the road. Every misstep becomes data, feedback, fascinated, an experience that can be transformed into wisdom. Simon Sinek often says that failure is not the opposite of success, it is part of success. His philosophy emphasizes learning, resilience, and purpose-driven persistence. I'm fascinated when your actions are rooted in a strong why. Failure becomes easier to bear because your focus shifts from the outcome to the mission. If your purpose is clear, setbacks become temporary detours, not dead ends. Fascinated. You start seeing every failure as a message, something to study, to understand, and to grow from. This perspective transforms fear of failure into curiosity, an eagerness to discover what can be improved. Fear no longer blocks progress. Fascinated, it becomes the spark that ignites persistence. Failure is also a mirror that reflects character. When things don't go as planned, fear exposes who we are beneath the surface, our patience, humility, and resilience. I'm fascinated. Some people crumble under pressure while others rise, fueled by the determination to learn. This is how great leaders are formed. They don't run from failure, they embrace it as a mentor. I'm fascinated. Every failure leaves a lesson carved deep within the heart, one that success could never teach. It humbles us, sharpens our focus, and prepares us for greater challenges. Without failure, there would be no innovation, no creativity. I'm fascinated, and no true progress. Every invention, every masterpiece, and every breakthrough has been built on the foundation of countless failures. Fear of failure can also be reframed as a sign that you're aiming high enough. If you never fail, I'm fascinated. It's likely you're not challenging yourself. Failure means you're stretching your abilities, testing your limits, and daring to go beyond the ordinary. It's proof that you're trying. The discomfort of failure teaches endurance. Fascinated, and the lessons it brings cultivate strength. Each time you recover from failure, you build resilience, a mental and emotional muscle that makes you capable of achieving greater things. Over time, fascinated, you stop fearing failure and start respecting it as a necessary step toward mastery. What makes failure such a powerful fuel is that it transforms potential energy into action. When you fail and decide to try again, fascinated, you carry with you a deeper understanding of what works and what doesn't. This knowledge, earned through experience, becomes the foundation for better choices and stronger results. Fascinated, fear of repeating mistakes often drives people to work smarter, plan better, and stay more disciplined. It turns fear into focus and failure into fire. Instead of stopping you, fascinated, it propels you forward with more clarity and determination than before. Ultimately, failure strips away illusions and reveals truth. It reminds you that success isn't a straight line. Fascinated, it's a series of rises and falls that refine your purpose. The fear of failure, when embraced, becomes the fuel that keeps your heart burning for progress. Each setback adds strength to your story and depth to your character. Fascinated, the person who dares to fail becomes unstoppable because they no longer live in fear, they live in pursuit. Failure doesn't break them, it builds them. And in learning to see failure as fuel, they discover the true essence of growth. Fascinated, every fall is a step toward flying higher. Confidence is not something we are born with, it is something we build brick by brick through experience and courage. At the heart of confidence lies fear, the fear of being wrong, fascinated, of being rejected, of not being enough. Yet true confidence does not come from avoiding fear. It comes from confronting it repeatedly until it no longer controls us. Every time we face fear and act despite it, fascinated, we prove to ourselves that we are stronger than our doubts. Confidence is not about perfection or arrogance. It is the quiet assurance that comes from knowing you can handle uncertainty because you faced it before and survived. Fascinated, fear has an interesting way of testing us. It often arrives right before moments that truly matter, before speaking up in a meeting, before starting a new venture, or before sharing a creative idea. In those moments, I'm fascinated. Fear tries to convince us to stay silent, to stay small, to stay safe. But every time we push past that resistance, we grow. The first time we take a risk, fear feels overwhelming. The second time, it's uncomfortable. The third time, I'm fascinated. It's manageable. Over time, the same situations that once terrified us become familiar, even exciting. That is how confidence is built, not by eliminating fear, but by proving to ourselves through repetition, fascinated, that we can rise above it. Simon Sinek often talks about the importance of consistency and purpose in personal growth. The same applies to building confidence. When you connect your actions to a purpose greater than yourself, fascinated, fear loses its grip. You no longer act for validation or approval. You act because you believe in something meaningful. This shift in focus from self to purpose strengthens confidence because it grounds your courage in conviction. Fascinated, the fear of failure becomes less significant when your motivation comes from within rather than from the opinions of others. Fascinated, confidence built this way, resilient, because it isn't dependent on external praise. It grows from inner alignment. Confidence also grows through the process of small victories. It doesn't emerge suddenly. Fascinated, it develops gradually through the accumulation of experiences where fear was faced and conquered. When you take on challenges, even small ones, and succeed, your brain registers a new belief. Fascinated, I can do this. Each success becomes evidence that you are capable. Even failures contribute to this process because surviving them proves that mistakes don't define you. Fascinated, the willingness to try again after falling builds an unshakable sense of self-trust, the essence of real confidence. It's not about knowing you'll never fail. It's about knowing you can recover when you do. Fascinated, another critical part of confidence is vulnerability. Many people believe confidence means never showing weakness or fear, but in truth, the ability to admit uncertainty and still take action is what defines strength. Fascinated, vulnerability allows authenticity, and authenticity builds trust, both with ourselves and with others. When we accept that fear is natural, we stop seeing it as proof of inadequacy. Instead, we recognize it as part of growth. Fascinated, confidence doesn't mean being fearless. It means being free to act even when fear is present. It's a mindset of courage wrapped in humility. Repeated exposure to fear transforms not only behavior, but identity. I'm fascinated when you face difficult situations again and again. You start to internalize a new belief about who you are, someone capable, adaptable, and strong. This identity becomes self-reinforcing. The more you act with courage, I'm fascinated, and the more confident you feel, and the more confident you feel, the more courageously you act. It's a continuous cycle of growth. Over time, fascinated, fear becomes less of an obstacle and more of a familiar signal that you are stepping into something meaningful. Confidence, therefore, is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of response. I'm fascinated. Confidence built through confronting fear is the foundation of resilience, leadership, and success. It gives you the strength to take initiative, to stand firm in your values. I'm fascinated, and to trust your instincts even when the path ahead is uncertain. Each time you challenge fear, you reclaim a piece of your power. What once made you anxious begins to inspire you. Confidence doesn't grow from comfort. I'm fascinated. It grows from confrontation, the continuous practice of turning fear into experience and experience into strength. It's a lifelong process, a habit of courage cultivated through action. When you live this way, fascinated, fear no longer limits you. It becomes a reminder of your potential, proof that you are alive, growing, and ready for more. Fear is not an obstacle to avoid, but a force to transform. When we learn to turn fear into fuel, fascinated, we discover strength, creativity, and resilience hidden within us. Every moment of fear carries a choice to retreat or to rise. Those who embrace fear as energy rather than resistance unlock their true potential. Fear sharpens focus, fascinated, deepens courage, and reminds us that what we're doing truly matters. It is the spark that ignites growth and the compass that points toward purpose. By understanding fear and acting despite it, we build confidence, courage, fascinated, and clarity. Life's greatest achievements don't come from comfort, but from confronting the unknown. When fear no longer dictates our limits, it becomes the engine that drives us forward. So don't silence your fear, use it. I'm fascinated. Let it be the fire that propels you toward the success and fulfillment you deserve.